morning. Thank you all for joining us. Looks like we have folks very quickly filing into our room. We're going to give it a few minutes before we delve into the presentation, but again, thanks for being here. So happy you could join us. All right. Looks like we have a few more people joining. We'll give it to 11:03 and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for your patience. All right. Still looks like we have people coming in. I think it's 11:03. We can go ahead and get started here. Well, good morning. Thank you again so much for joining us for the last minute invitation to those who cleared their schedules and made the time. We're so incredibly grateful. My name is Emily Breslin. I'm the Deputy Director of Communications and External Affairs for the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. So thanks again this morning for being here to learn more about the proposal for the new Office of Community Partnerships and Strategic Communications as part of Governor Gavin Newsom's California Blueprint 2022-2023 budget announced earlier this week. Before we get underway, I wanted to introduce the individuals who we'll be hearing from today. So on the line, we have Sam Asefa, the Director of the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, and the State of California's lead land use and planning agency and the chair of the California Strategic Growth Council. We have Maricela Rodriguez, the Director of Civic Engagement and Strategic Partnerships at the Office of California Governor Gavin Newsom. We have a very special guest, Dolores Huerta of the Dolores Huerta Foundation. Incredibly excited that she is going to be joining and speaking with us today. Our other special guests here today are Susan Watson, the Program Director for the COVID-19 Equity Initiative, the California for Health Community of Practice and California Adolescent Health Collaborative at the Public Health Institute. We have Rachel Rios, Executive Director of the La Familia Counseling Center. And we're also joined by phone today, and they're available for answering questions. As part of our Q&A listening format at the end is California Strategic Growth Council's Executive Director, Lynn Van Koch-Liebert. Also on the line from the Strategic Growth Council is Kiran Kumar, our Deputy Director of Equity and Government Transformation. We also have Annie Carney, Deputy Director of Civic Engagement and Strategic Partnerships, and Jessica Martinez Pulido, Assistant Director of Civic Engagement and Strategic Partnerships, both at the Office of Governor Gavin Newsom. Mitchell, if you'll go to the next slide for me. Great. Okay. So this is our agenda for today. Welcome, introductions. In just a moment, I'll run through our Q&A format. You'll hear first from Sam Asafa, followed by Maricela Rodriguez. Then Dolores Huerta will be speaking, Sue Watson, Rachel Rios, and then towards the end of our formatted webinar, we'll have a stakeholder Q&A, and I'll be facilitating that. If you want to go to the next slide, Mitchell. Great. Our speakers, next slide. All right, so a few housekeeping items for today. In the last 20 to 25 minutes, we're going to have a listening session where you'll have an opportunity to ask questions or provide feedback. As we have many people on the line today, we are asking that you either use the Q&A chat window to ask your question or to raise your hand, and I'll go ahead and call on you in the order that I've seen you raise your hand. Please do make sure to stay muted until your name has been called so we can keep everything organized. We will likely not have time to hear from everyone today, unfortunately, but we really want to emphasize that as the proposed office is still in the very early stages, this is an opportunity for us to be collaborating and in communication if you have questions or feedback. So you can get in touch with us at the email address shown on the screen, and that's info@opr.ca.gov. And we'll also continue to stay in touch via email, and you can expect our next correspondence to include a link to today's webinar recording in case you have colleagues who weren't able to join us. And then at this point, I will pass it off to Director Sam Asafa of the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. Sam.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Emily, and thank you everyone for taking the time to be here this morning, especially on a short notice. This is an exciting time, I think, with the governor's unprecedented, bold, and ambitious budget proposal, one of which we will be talking about this morning, the creation of a new Office of Community Partnerships and Strategic Communications. I also want to give special thank you again to Dolores, Susan, and Rachel for joining us as panelists here. It is their critical work that really informed, and many of you here that really informed, the governor's directive to actually open this office. And we'll talk about what the purpose is. Again, I'm Sam Asafa. I'm the director of the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, or known as OPR. OPR is the state's lead land use and planning agency that is tasked with cross-agency coordination across land use, the environment, climate, and climate change. As Emily mentioned, I also chair the California Strategic Growth Council. It is a cabinet-level body that is tasked with advancing the state's climate, transportation, conservation, and equity goals. As we'll talk about this office, you will see why this office is really a critical part of the work of OPR and the Strategic Growth Council in really advancing those equity climate goals that both multiple agencies of the state are really focused on. So through the governor's California Blueprint budget that he announced on Monday, $65 million was proposed for the creation of the Office of Community Partnerships and Strategic Communications to manage the state's highest priority public awareness and community outreach campaigns, as well as provide ongoing support to California's community-based organizations. The proposed office builds on the incredible and intentional work that was spearheaded by the 2020 census, which, thank you, most of you have participated in, and the California Complete Count office as well. And then the Vaccinate All 58 team, again, another incredible work that was led by Director Maricela Rodriguez and her team, as well as many of the community-based organizations that are here today, including La Familia Counseling Center and the Public Health Institute. So as the governor made clear in his Monday budget announcement and reiterated again yesterday in Kern County, California is a place that not only tolerates, but celebrates its diversity and respect the rights and responsibilities we have towards our diverse communities. The proposed office is a clear signifier of the administration's recognition and respect for its communities by formalizing the unique critical role that community-based organizations play in advancing the state's goals in reaching out and building trust with California's diverse constituents and critical and in increasing access to culturally competent information and critical resources. So the new office would reside within the Office of Planning and Research at OPR, which also houses California Volunteers and the California Strategic Growth Council. The new office would complement the technical assistance and capacity building, civic volunteerism, and community engagement currently overseen by SGC, the Strategic Growth Council, and the California Volunteers by taking on the unique role in state government of managing priority public awareness and outreach campaigns statewide. As written in the statute by the California legislature, the OPR is tasked, as I mentioned, with cross-agency coordination across a number of critical issues from land use to environment and climate change. And the new office would support this through coordinated outreach and engagement for a number of cross-cutting issues and policy initiatives. So in closing, I want to echo Governor Newsom's sentiments by saying that myself and colleagues at OPR and across the state have a profound respect for communities in California and the resources that you bring to these policies and issues that we try to address. We understand that this respect entails building trusting relationships as well as listening to and supporting all of you, the experts who have intimate knowledge of your communities. In doing effective and equitable planning policy and program-based work, there is a need to formalize a partnership structure with our community-based organizations. And with the governor's proposal of this office, we are taking an important and as far as I'm concerned, unprecedented step in doing this by formalizing such a structure. Oftentimes, states and cities that I've worked across the country set some structure like this during crisis and or every 10 years during the census program. We build significant relationships at that time. Many states and cities are actually grappling with how do we institutionalize effective outreach and engagement that was learned through crisis and then make it a standard practice as part of the state's work. So with that, I again want to thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation today. And we want to hear from you, obviously, in how we can shape this office, but we look forward to an ongoing collaboration. So with that, I'll pass it to Director Maricela Rodriguez. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all of this good feedback that you just shared. First, I just want to start with my gratitude to everyone who's joining here, not only just for making time, but I know many of you have been part of our the state's efforts around census and COVID-19 response. And as was mentioned, I have helped to spearhead those two major campaigns. And so again, I just want to start with a tremendous gratitude for the work that many of you are doing in partnership with the state and in partnership with many other local partners with the communities that really need it the most. And so I wanted just to give a little bit more information and then move it along because we really want to spend as much time as possible hearing feedback from folks. So one is, as you've heard, we're building off of the best practices and lessons learned that we've had from census and from our COVID-19 response. It's really been a comprehensive model that we've been using where it is centered around community engagement and public education. And there's components that are behind that that include other activities that are also envisioned in this office that include ongoing support for research, for technology, for combating mis and disinformation, for a lot of these components that have really built a comprehensive model of engaging community and providing them with the information that they need, that's reliable, that's actionable, and that's up to date, and that it's culturally relevant, including having information be in language. And much of that work is done with the feedback and with the information that we hear from our community partners and extended partners beyond that. This comprehensive model has also allowed us to be really intentional about filling gaps, have allowed us to be quick when it's related to rapid response, filling gaps, changing tactics, as well as building partnerships, including with folks in philanthropy. And so that's, I'm excited to hear from Sue from PHI today, because she can speak to that. So not only does it help us plan, it helps us create partnerships, it helps us with rapid response, it helps us do a much better job of how we directly engage with community. As you've heard, this is a proposal for $65 million in ongoing funding, with $15 million going for projected for state operations, as well as $50 million in local assistance. The work that happens next is going to be to really kind of really assess the total cost for this effort and really break down those costs. And so again, just a appreciation for the work that everyone has been doing. We want to hear from you. This is just the first step in much of what we're going to continue to do as we refine this proposal and provide more details. And you're going to hear, as I mentioned, from Sue, who's going to give you a little bit of background on how we've worked with philanthropy, and you're going to hear from Rachel about how this partnership with the state has also benefited both how she is able to work as well as the work that she does in community. I just want to make sure I haven't missed anything that I wanted to share. There's, I'm sure I can provide more details if folks have questions, but I also just want to go ahead and pass it on to Dolores Huerta, who really needs no introduction, who can really can think of no one better that understands the value that community partners bring in reaching community. So I want to go ahead and turn it over to you, Dolores. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Maricela. And I think this is such a brilliant idea. And not only is it brilliant, but it's also very practical and it's very effective and something that has been needed for so many years. I've been in community organizing, as many of you know, for the last 70 years of my life. And this is a dream come true, because when we do partner and recognize and really uplift the work that the community benefit organizations do in the community, oh my gosh, this is going to make our work so much better, so much stronger, because most of the nonprofit organizations always struggle to get the funding that they need to be able to do the work that really is supportive of the government policies that have been legislated, but sometimes have trouble being implemented. And we know, as it was mentioned earlier, the important work that many of us have done in the census and are now doing, like our organization on COVID, trying to stop the spread of the pandemic. And so to know that we're going to get this kind of support in partnership with government and other philanthropic organizations, I mean, this is like a dream come true. This is like a dream come true. We know that the community-based organizations they have the pulse of the community. They are close to the ground. They know what the challenges are. They know what needs to be done to get government programs implemented effectively and efficiently. And so this is really going to be, you might say, a saving for taxpayers, because one thing that the community benefit organizations do is that we rely and we recruit a lot of volunteers to help us do the work that is needed to be done. And of course, this means that any tax dollars that is spent on assisting community organizations to do their work is really, at the end of the day, saving our government money, because volunteers often do not have to be paid. They do want to be recognized and maybe here and there have a stipend or two, but they do the vital work of our communities. And this partnership will not only this, but this is going to strengthen our democracy, because when we get volunteers and we get them involved in doing government work, that really means, number one, that they trust government. They know how important government is. They know why they have to pay taxes, because our governments are the ones that are going to be providing the resources and the support that they need in their communities. So this is a win-win situation all around. I am looking forward to see how this is going to be implemented. And I know for myself, and I know that all other community-based organizations are going to say, wow, this is about time. This is something that we've always wanted to happen. Instead of having an adversarial relationship with government, and a lot of us have run into that at times for whatever political reasons there might be out there, that they, people don't give us the support that we need. We know that now this is going to be changing with this, excuse me, I'm sorry about that. This is going to be changed when we become official partners with the government. Instead of, you might say, the stepchildren of government, but we are going to be locked in step with them to make government work, to make sure that our communities get the support that they need, and that the work that needs to be done, particularly in education, particularly in health, and many of the challenges that are meeting us today in addressing global warming, et cetera. This is, as I said before, it's a dream come true. I am looking forward to this partnership, and so happy that we can finally see this dream is being realized. Thank you. Thank you very much, Governor Gavin Newsom, everybody that is responsible to make this happen. And now I would like to pass this on to Sue Watson.
Thank you for that, and really happy to be here and honored to follow you, Dolores. So I'm going to share with you about Together Toward Health. This is a program of the Public Health Institute and is a statewide initiative to stop the spread of COVID-19 and strengthen the health and resilience in California's most impacted communities. It was launched in August of 2020 with a team at the Public Health Institute coordinating efforts to connect with community-based organizations to expand and support community outreach, capacity building, and professional and workforce development efforts. Now, Together Toward Health is made possible by the generous support and partnership of over 25 philanthropic funders who saw the urgency of the moment and contributed to this effort. I also want to specifically thank Kathleen Kelly-Janis for championing this work with philanthropic leaders, and for the governor's office for their partnership from the outset. Next slide, please. Now, we all learned early on that the COVID-19 pandemic was disproportionately impacting communities of color across the state. And the reality is that these communities have suffered from significant health disparities and inequities for generations. And as a result, a one-size-fits-all approach was never going to work for a state as vibrantly diverse as California. We knew it was critical to support and partner with trusted community organizations on the ground who know how to reach and engage the communities that were being most affected. So we are supporting COVID response and recovery efforts that are rooted in how community members live, where they are, organized by people they trust, and offered in the languages they speak, providing direct resources to these organizations to identify the approaches and solutions that work best based on their expertise. And Together Toward Health has not just been passing along funding, but also providing coordination, support, and sometimes counsel to the community organizations we fund. We're providing learning and capacity building opportunities for the CBOs, because it's vital that these organizations that we are relying on also have opportunities to grow and network with peers. These organizations are essential and are equity, so the stronger and more connected they are, the better we will all be. We are also supporting the essential bridges between government and community organizations to more successfully meet the needs of community members now and hopefully into the future. Included in this has been our partnership with the Governor's Office, CDPH, Office of Emergency Services, and others along the way to share information, resources, and opportunities. And this too is a great example of the power of collaboration across sectors. And I think it serves as a foundation for this newly proposed office. It is in all of our interests to build upon what we've achieved here so that communities can recover and thrive with the help of the combined contributions of community-based organizations, state and local government, philanthropic funders, and intermediaries like PHI. Next slide, please. So this slide just gives you a snapshot of what Together Toward Health has been able to accomplish into early December. And overall, we have committed over $30 million that has gone directly, reaching more than 500 community organizations around the state. And while there is some overlap here with some of the state's own efforts, these investments have proven to be both additive and complementary to those efforts. And we continue to be in regular conversation with our state partners to explore how we can collectively identify and fill gaps where new hotspots arise using lots of data points, including the real granular data that the state has been tracking. And next slide, please. And this last slide is an example of the diversity and creativity that the CBOs have shown with their efforts. Multiple partners have shared with us that the philanthropic funding from Together Toward Health has allowed them to do things that other funding streams may not have fully supported. And so this is what the best of public health looks like, sharing expertise and resources between community organizations, local and state government agencies, healthcare providers, faith leaders, educators, philanthropy, and others to tackle things like COVID-19 and emerging challenges together. And we believe that building upon these efforts and keeping community-rooted organizations as trusted, equal partners can continue paving the way for a healthier and more equitable future for all California. And I really look forward to this office being part of that drive. And so thank you for listening, and I'm going to now pass it over to Rachel.
Thank you, Susan. And let me just say how much I love and appreciate Together Towards Health and the Public Health Institute. They have been an amazing partner in all of this work. So hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Rios. I'm the Executive Director of La Familia Counseling Center. We are a nonprofit organization here in Sacramento County, serving all of our communities. And let me also say how excited I am for this new office, and my hope that this new office will, bring the partnerships that really will advance health equity for our communities, especially our most vulnerable and marginalized communities. We know the importance of this. We know the importance, as everyone has talked about, the boots on the ground and how that can really change the trajectory for many of our communities, and how their voice is often not heard. But through these opportunities and partnerships, we know that this can create the foundation for that community power. Next slide, please. So we heard a little bit about the importance of this partnership, especially on initiatives like our census. And we know that many times there is a lack of trust in our communities and lack of information that's either language appropriate or culturally appropriate. And so working together with government and nonprofit organizations, we can reach those hard to reach communities. We can reach the most diverse communities and the most marginalized communities. During the census was an opportunity where we, as community organizations statewide, had to combat lots of challenges this last census, dealing with a lot of national rhetoric, a lot of confusion, and really around a lot of trust. And despite all of our efforts in the year before of planning, COVID happened. And so we had to pivot, and we had to be able to have that flexibility to know our communities and see how we could still meet those goals of getting people to turn in their information, to be counted. And so what you see on the slides is just some of the creative approaches that our organization, and a lot of the organizations here in Sacramento actually did. We did some car caravans, and we kind of utilized our community and their love for cars, and we did like a lowrider caravan, really just going through a lot of our communities and just letting them know that it was important for them to be counted. And these are just some examples of how communities can partner with state agencies to reach those mutual goals. Next slide. Obviously leveraging from the work that we did with the census, when the pandemic hit, we recognized that community organizations could not wait. We needed to really be involved and engaged in letting our community know what was going on. Public health really is a shared responsibility between our public officials and our community members. And so it was so important that, again, we leveraged that we looked at some of the conditions as Susan talked about. We know that our communities of color were the most impacted by this. And so working together with our partners, looking for creative ways that we could really communicate with community members about how they could be safe, where they could get tested, where they could get vaccines. And then again, it's about that trust. When you live in the shadows and you're marginalized, you don't feel comfortable being able to access services. And a lot of services are sometimes online, and folks don't have that. So you really need a little bit that warm handoff, that approach. What we've recognized is through this is that partnership means a diversity, not just of organizations working together to meet the public's needs, but of a diversity of different disciplines and skill sets working together to be able to meet those needs, working across the boundaries and across disciplines. Next slide. So again, really it's the power of working together. We have a big mural that says Juntos Podemos, together we can do things, together we work stronger, we can be more effective. The importance of leveraging community resources is critical to be able to make decisions, to be able to capture data, but most importantly, to be able to have our communities thrive. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Emily, and I believe that we might be open for some questions. Again, thank you to the governor's office for this very innovative and creative, much needed approach.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Wow, incredibly inspiring to hear from all of our speakers today. And as I'll echo Director Acefa, this is an incredibly inspirational budget that the governor announced on Monday, and this is certainly a very exciting piece of it. So this brings us to our Q&A listening session format. So this is an opportunity for you to ask questions, provide comments and feedback. And the way we're going to do this is we do have some questions that came in through the chat window. And if I could ask folks to raise their hand, I'm going to go and alternate between the questions in the chat, or sorry, the questions in the Q&A box here and those who've raised their hands. So if you want to raise your hand, ask a question, we're going to pull this slide down so it's easier to see those who have raised their hand. All right, let's see here. So it looks like Martha Ashkenazi, I'm not sure I pronounced your last name right. If you would like to unmute yourself and ask your question or leave your comment.
Good morning. My name is Martha Diaz Ashkenazi. I'm the publisher of the San Fernando Valley Sun El Sol newspaper, a bilingual newspaper that has been circulating in the San Fernando Valley since 1904, and a member of the Latino Media Collaborative. I want to, number one, say this is a great move by the governor to include and get information out through trusted messengers, and to let everybody know that community newspapers are not CBOs, but we are trusted messengers, and we are very close to the ground, and we need support as well, because messages get out through our newspaper in the language that people use. They trust us. We're on the ground. We're here. They listen to what we have to say. We move the needle. And so I want to make sure that we're included on everything. And if there's a way, to maximize, either it's ads or partnerships or whatever, that we stand ready to get the message out, and we know that people will listen, and we're good partners. So just wanted to put that out there, that Vaccinate 58 ran ads through newspapers, and that moved the needle. And I think together, government, CBOs, and local media, we got the job done. But climate change needs to be addressed, and many other things. So thank you again for letting me speak, and for having this very informative session.
Wonderful. Maricela, others, any feedback there?
I thank you. My connection is a little spotty, so I'm going to keep my camera off. I do want to say that there is an intention to have public education be a component of this, and as we continue to refine the proposal, we'll have more details on that. So just we do have an intention to include the communications component as part of this overall effort. I think it's going to be a matter of resources and how we can properly resource all of these different components, because as you know, both Census and COVID have been pretty heavy lifts. And so it is a matter of looking at those costs, and but that is the intention, because we do know that we the most impact when we can ensure that the outreach work and that the communications work is very much done in coordination and collaboration, and that there's a feedback loop to help always refine messaging and address questions and concerns from community.
Thank you, Maricela. So I'm going to go to a question in the Q&A chat bar here. Is the funding for government spending or for contracting partnering on some of the work, for example, data and technology development? Maricela, do you want to take that?
If I'm not answering the question correctly, please jump in. There is a technology component in there, and just to give some context on what that is, I think we've all referenced that these efforts have been both equity and data driven, and so that has been in large part due to how we have gathered information as well as how we have mapped it. And so as an example for COVID, we're not only looking at the Healthy Places Index, but we're also looking at the Hard to Count Index, which has a lot of overlap. But then we're also looking at COVID cases, hospitalization rates, looking at hotspots to really help refine that rapid response that I referenced earlier. For that mapping that I've referenced, that includes technology. And so some of you may be familiar with how we manage Census and how we also are working with COVID, that we have a special tool that we've used that's a geospatial mapping tool that is an Ezra tool that allows us to really kind of map and look at both not just a big picture, but also can look at very granular geographical areas in the state. So we're looking at, that's just one example of technology that we hope that we can continue to support as part of these efforts. But that's just one example.
Great. And I would encourage, if folks feel we haven't adequately responded or answered their question in the way that it was written, please do email us. I'm also realizing and reading many of these questions and comments in the chat. There's an opportunity for us to distill a lot of these questions into a fact sheet. So that's also something we'll be looking at after we wrap up today. So I'm going to go to another person, April Newman, who's raised her hand. April, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question or provide your comment.
Thank you so much. I'm April Newman. I work with the California Collaborative for Immigrant Justice. And specifically, I work on an initiative called the Vaccine Education and Empowerment in Detention. And that is to bring culturally and linguistically competent information on the COVID-19 vaccine and now boosters to people in immigrant detention facilities in California. So my question is, will any of these funds be directed specifically to get both information and the vaccines and boosters themselves to immigrants in detention? Thank you.
Thank you, April. Appreciate that comment. To move us along, I'm going to go to another question here in our Q&A. So Janice asks, how can individual entrepreneurs who are interested and actively work in community engagement become involved? Maricela, Anna, Jessica, any response to that?
I think, it might be helpful to have a follow-up conversation with that particular individual, just to see where are particular ideas that they're maybe thinking about. And as we mentioned, this is, very early on in the proposal. So I think all the feedback that folks have is really helpful at this point. Both of these campaigns, Census and COVID, have, I know we're really talking broadly about community partnerships. That includes very much CBOs, but the number of partnerships that we've had across these campaigns, as well as other state campaigns, have been pretty diverse. We've also worked with faith-based organizations, for example, and so there's a number of different partnerships that kind of fall under the community outreach component. So I'm really interested in feedback in terms of ideas that folks have. Again, we may be limited by resources, but really open to the feedback that folks have and ideas that folks have.
Yeah, I'll chime in a bit. So I think those are great questions. Part of the process is that this is at the high level proposal. One of the key objectives here for this office is also to really understand all the other cross-cutting engagement that the state has in multiple state agencies, and then figure out the most effective and cost-effective as well way to actually engage, whether it's CBOs or other organizations that are more effective to get the word out or to get the best outcome. So we're still at the early stages. This is part of the process to really inform how this would be structured, including what the distribution of the dollars would be, the $65 million between CBOs and running the office, technology. But just know that this is part of that process, and we want to hear. This is a new structure as well, so we want to hear your feedback and help inform the final detail of what the structure of the office is going to be.
Thank you, Director Acefa. I'm actually going to turn it over. It looks like Ms. Dolores Huerta has a question or a comment. Dolores, do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question?
I just wanted to comment that having a partnership with the state directly is really going to help the community-based organizations, because some of us who live in counties where we do not have very friendly political, you might say the political framework, that often it's very difficult to be able to, get the funding that we need to do the work. And having a partnership directly with the state will cut through all of that red tape and make it a lot easier and again, more effective way to be able to do the community work that needs to be done. And the other great thing is that by having the state giving the CBOs the legitimacy that we need, oftentimes, so we're not beggars, you might say, but also we have, by the work that we do, that we all create so much leadership, in the community. So I think when you think of the outcomes that are going to come from this partnership, they are just remarkable. And we don't even know right now, but we know that it's going to be, as I said before, a great contribution to building a democracy right at our base where we need it the most.
Thank you, Ms. Huerta. Really appreciate that. I'm going to go to a chat question here. So Suzanne Silber says this is a very exciting effort. How will this cross-pollinate with the resilience-based budget? For example, OPR is funding 20, and then she looks like she has a typo, 20 million for environmental justice collaboratives and 100 million for resilience hubs. Will there be some cross-pollination with these initiatives? Sam, do you want, Director Sefa, do you want to take that?
Sure, the short answer is yes. As I mentioned in the beginning of my statement, one of the central objective of having this in the OPR is because of OPR's sort of cross-cutting engagement with not only the climate budget, but across almost 7 state departments, there would be cross-pollination of how we engage with communities, how we reach out on information on climate. So yes, there will be internal coordination as well as through OPR's sort of cross-departmental engagement, there will be cross-pollination. That's one of the central objectives of having this office at OPR.
Thank you, Director Sefa. It looks like I'm going to go to Adelo Freitas. They have their hand up. If you'd like to unmute and provide your question or comment.
Thank you. Yeah. So my name is Dilo. I'm a planner in Northern California in the city of Arcata. And we are undertaking a pretty comprehensive update to our general plan right now, land use, transportation, and also health. And one thing that we've been exploring is trying to incorporate a racial equity review group based basically on a CBO model. But it's really challenging to find ways to reimburse people for their time, to pay them for their time and their expertise. And we're struggling to work within our existing grant sources from HCD and the Department of Conservation to find a way to fund this expertise. So that's definitely one thing I would suggest considering, is ways to work with other state departments and agencies like the Strategic Growth Council and HCD and the Department of Conservation, and encourage them to either use this money to further their own agendas for housing and sustainability, or create other ways for them to use their own money. For example, we could use CDBG program income to fund this work, but we just need somebody to tell us yes. So I guess that would be something as a comment, encourage you to consider that, and also a question: how would this work in the context of updating policy and bringing in CBOs to that conversation and reimbursing them for their time?
Looks like our executive director, Lynn Von Cook-Liebert, came on camera. Lynn, do you want to take that?
I would love to take that question. Thank you. And thank you so much for raising that. That is a question that I know our team has been focusing on over the last couple months, really thinking about the questions around how to increase access to state resources, how to think about eligible activities and expenses, and how to make sure that we're not adding or creating barriers to entry for participation with state programs and state resources. So one of the things that the Strategic Growth Council is looking at is thinking through how to partner with this new office to tackle some of the structural impediments, and really think through, with this new partnership in place, how can we be hearing directly from implementers of these dollars and programs about what's working, what's not working, and where we can be effectuating change across our organizations. And for those who may not be as familiar with the Strategic Growth Council, we have 7 state agencies that sit on our council. And so this will be a great place to be able to have and center those conversations and be able to work towards broad changes that would impact multiple agencies in addition to this new office.
Thank you so much, Director. Director Sefa, is there anything else you would want to add to that? If not, I'll move to our next question. Okay, great. Oh, Director Sefa, it looks like, yeah, you're on.
No, the only point is that's a very good point. That's one of the biggest challenges every municipality deals with, especially developing comprehensive plans or equity metrics. You go back to the same community-based organizations and ask them to engage, but we're not paying them for their resources. They're not seen as consultants or experts. So that's what we're trying to change through this process. And that's what the governor really wants to, one of the issues that he wants to address through this. And as Lynn mentioned, we're going to use the structure that we have to make institutional change in the way how we engage with CBOs and for what purpose.
Just really quickly, I would also pass it off to Deputy Director Kumar. Would you like to add to this?
Yeah, happily. And I'm just tracking this thread of questions as well as some in the chat around what is emerging as a theme around capacity building generally. And I think it's important to note that the state is through programs like those mentioned, the $20 million and $100 million for climate collaboratives and community resilience centers is already taking big steps towards investing in capacity building, both social and physical infrastructure. And so this new office would definitely have connections to those programs where we're working with, and we're hoping to invest in communities to really advance policy and systems change through capacity building, to further build out opportunities for partnership around strategic communications around these key campaigns.
Thank you so much. All right, so I'm going to go to a question in the Q&A here. It's a comment/question from David Utuone. One huge initial barrier while doing much of this work locally in the Inland Empire region was access to disaggregated Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander COVID-19 data. When last checked, there were only 14 of the 58 counties disaggregated in the data from the umbrella API identifier. Wondering if the state will be putting out any initiatives to ensure NHPI, COVID, and all health data is disaggregated and equitably reflected across the state. So I think there are a number of folks on the line who could talk to this. I'll pass it first to Director Rodriguez.
Thank you so much for that question. And I know that there likely will be questions even more broadly beyond, related data and disaggregated data. So I do want to take that back because there are other folks that are involved in other related questions regarding data and population specific data. So it's a very valid question that I want to make sure that I do justice to it. So please let me circle back on that one, but do acknowledge the question and know that it's likely something that will come up with other populations as well.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go to us looks like Mar Velez has their hand up. Mar, if you would like to unmute and ask your question or provide your comment.
Sure. Thank you so much. Again, Marvelous, State Policy Senior Manager with the Latino Coalition for a Healthy California. First, thank you so much for this presentation and this proposal. Really great to see the recognition of the CBO infrastructure that supports some of our most impacted communities. A lot of this is actually very reminiscent of the Health Equity and Racial Justice Fund, which LCHC is a co-sponsor of, along with the California Pan-Ethnic Health Network, the California Black Health Network, Asian Pacific Partners for Empowerment, Advocacy, and Leadership Appeal. So we're all co-sponsors of the Health Equity and Racial Justice Fund, which is asking for at least 100 million ongoing funding to directly fund CBOs. So great to see the alignment. The legislature actually did support this proposal last year. And we have been in conversations with the governor's office to include it in this year's budget. So just seeing the natural alignment between what this office is going to be and what you're proposing today, would you all be open to speaking with us regarding some of this alignment and supporting our fund?
I think, Mar, we can follow up via email. If you want to put privately chat me in the chat bar there, we can follow up via email and take this offline. But thank you so much for that comment. Director Rodriguez, would you want to take anything here at this point?
I think the follow-up conversation is a great idea.
Great, thank you so much. All right, I'm going to move to a question in the Q&A chat window here. Just as a reminder, we do have quite a number of questions. We're not going to be able to get to them by 12 o'clock this afternoon, but we will be downloading all of the questions and comments left in the chat and Q&A bar and be trying to distill and find patterns in all of them to develop a fact sheet to share with you after wrapping up today. All right, so let's see here. This is a very exciting program. This is from Dr. Akima Cornell. How will this program help connect CDOs and community groups to subject matter, technical experts and consultants in sustainability and climate services? So I'll start with you, Director Rodriguez.
Hi, and I want to make a quick point here that I realize we may have missed that I think is relevant to this question, maybe more broadly. But the two issue areas that we're looking at right now, because, you know, I think we've mentioned in our comments that we would be looking at are the highest public priority, public education and community outreach campaigns. And the two issue areas that we're looking at right now is ongoing COVID response as well as climate justice, and in particular, our drought response. And as you know, we've mentioned before, this is, you know, early stages of this proposal. We will continue to refine this full scope of the office. Everyone's feedback here is very helpful in helping us think through a lot of these questions and components. And so in terms of the question, and Emily, you might need to remind me again about the question again, but I think that the intention with this office, kind of centralizing those specific select campaigns, the intention is to work directly with those relevant and respective state departments that would serve as subject matter experts. And so in those discussions, as we build and refine any public education campaign under the scope of work, I believe those questions would be integrated in our conversations, because we would continue that very close relationship with those respective departments.
Thank you, Director Rodriguez. On that point, it looks like we have a number of questions here on when will the first grant cycle be, and kind of generally when will funding become available. We would want to reiterate that this is still very much a proposal at this time, but Maricela, Director Rodriguez, would you want to speak more directly to timeline as part of this process?
Thank you. You know, I just want to reiterate, Emily, what you said, that this is the first step, and it is a proposal. It still has to go through the process. We are hoping in the next couple of weeks, as we build trailer bill language, to really nail down some of these more finer details. And so we are looking at having more detail in the next couple of weeks. I don't know, Director Acefa, if you want to add more to what I've said here.
Sure. So typical to any budget process, what Maricela mentioned, trailer bill, that is a bill that really puts more detail on it to make it to make legislative changes. So all that process will go through May. And then finally, the legislature has to weigh in between now and then as well, in terms of what they would like to see in the budget. It may not end up being exactly the same. So that's just a typical process. So once that is completed and the legislature, you know, votes to approve governor's budget and he signs it, the office will be in place, I believe, 2023. So by the time the structure is in place and money is distributed, it would be probably towards that timeline.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I'm going to do one last question here. I think it really is a critical question to highlight as part of this process, and it's from Jane Clough. Will you be seeking advice from this community on how to structure the office? So I'll first hand that to Director Rodriguez, and then perhaps Sam, you can close us, Director Acefa, you can close us out with that question, response to the question.
Emily, I'm sorry, can you repeat it? Was it more of a general question of, are we seeking feedback?
Yeah, so will you be seeking advice from this community on how to structure the office?
I think the short answer is yes, and this is why we're starting with this webinar today, and really want this to be something that has impact. You've heard our intentions in terms of how we can connect the dots, how we can work in a way that is helpful to our community partners, in a way that we can build connections, leverage the existing structure that institutional structure that we have, as Director Acefa mentioned earlier. So I think the short answer is yes, all of this feedback today is really helpful, but we are open to an ongoing conversation on this as we continue in the process. So Emily, I know you mentioned an email earlier as part of the presentation. Just want to make sure folks have it. And we want to follow up, as you mentioned, with a fact sheet. If folks are open to also amplifying information about this office, we want to make sure that folks have information that you can use to do so. But again, yes, I think the short answer is yes, that we want to continue to receive feedback from folks. We know this is a long process. There's a lot of folks who will likely have feedback, and we will do our best to integrate and engage with folks as much as possible. But Dr. Acefa, please chime in and let me know if you want to address anything that I've said specifically or add on to it.
Sure. So again, as I mentioned earlier, this is an idea and a proposal that we are putting out through the budget process. We want to engage and hear from constituents, especially the people who are on the ground, as was described before, who know how this could work best for them. It is also important to know that the governor's thoughts and ideas on this was not just developed because of the COVID experience and the census, how effective that was. This issue at the high level is something that all of us and all of you have identified as an issue for many, many, many years. Every state department that engages with community groups and community-based organizations hear from CBOs some of the challenges around resources, around capacity. And one of the issues that we have seen over time, again and again, government sometimes repeats the same things again and again, and we put together a structure to respond to crisis, and then we dismantle that, and then we come back to you again on any number of issues. So it is really informed by years of experience and issues that you have raised. So we shouldn't lose that sort of higher level input that was the driver for the proposal for this office. Now, going to sort of the specific details of how this would work best within the proposed budget, within the proposed structures, and other relevant programs throughout the state. Yes, we want to refine that as part of the listening sessions in multiple forms that we will be engaging you with. It's also important to know your representatives will weigh in as well on this, and they need to hear from you directly. And sometimes our channel is hearing through your representatives from your districts, so that we help shape that as well. So that is an important engagement as part of this process. So I'll just end by saying again, thank you so much for your time. I know you have many other things to do. And we really appreciate hearing from you. It will inform our the details of the work, and we'll continue to engage with you as we hopefully get this eventually to the governor's desk within a few months. But thank you again for your participation.
Thank you, Director Acefa. And I would also just thank you, Ms. Dolores Huerta, for joining us, Rachel Rios for being here, Susan Watson for being here, Kiran Kumar. We have Maricela Rodriguez, Director Maricela Rodriguez, Director Acefa, We have Jessica Martinez Pulido and Annie Carney, folks who have made available their time today and have helped us to flesh out a little bit further this proposal. We have 27 unanswered questions in the chat. I want to be in full transparency. We will be downloading those and doing our best to distill those as part of a fact sheet, as part of our follow-up correspondence to you, in addition to the webinar link and slide deck as requested. And with that, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your partnership and collaboration as part of this process. Director Acefa, if you'd like to close us out, I think we're ready to end here.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you, Emily, for really organizing and spearheading this and coordinating. Incredible work. It has been great for me to hear this. I'm not new to this. I've engaged significantly on community-based organizations throughout my career. For me, what has been incredibly exciting over the last couple of weeks, and then developing this over the last few weeks with my colleagues, has been, I don't know of any other state in the country that is really tackling this issue in the way this state is, in really addressing and acknowledging the challenges of engaging with CBOs. To Dolores' point, I think it is important to have a one-point contact within the state as well, and with CBOs that may have challenges in getting through the maze of government organizations. I can see this office eventually becoming an incredible conduit into some of the questions that were asked, pointing CBOs to the right place so that you don't go through the maze. So there's an incredible amount of potential for this office. And I'm incredibly excited, obviously not just by this package as well, but if you have time, I would highly encourage you to look at the total budget. A lot of the issues there touch on all of the work that you do every single day, from equity, climate, economic development. There's incredible amount of great proposal within the budget, but one of the highest part of that is how the budget has really interconnected a lot of these issues and challenges of today, and the challenges of structural and institutional racism that has really affected and impacted communities of color especially. And there's a lot there in its totality. So that's why I'm excited about this budget proposal, and really look forward to this transformative budget in so many ways, and working with you to really see how this could help improve the lives and livelihoods of Californians in the coming years and for decades to come. So again, thank you for your time, and please pay attention to the budget process, and hopefully we will be engaging more and more productive ways moving forward. Thank you, everybody, and we'll.
Thank you. Take care.